The very first basketball game to be released for the PlayStation 2 was NCAA Final Four 2001 from 989 Sports. Not college, mind you, but all forms of basketball. It does seem kind of odd to think about it today, but it's true nonetheless. A glut of NBA titles would hit shelves a few months down the track, but for a precious period, NCAA Final Four 2001 would be the only basketball game in town for those owning a PS2. It was a blessing that would turn out to be a curse. First mover advantage can be a very real thing. Sometimes simply being out on the market gives you a head start others cannot recover from. Sometimes it's not every time, however. Let's begin with the most curious aspect of the game, the release date. NCAA Final Four 2001 would be placed out in retail stores across America on December 19th, 2000, some 6 days before Christmas. In other words, none of the major video game magazines would have reviewed the title. Sure, there were a few websites with reviews available, but that was still very much a niche thing. Basically, 989 Sports wanted to put consumers into a bind when making a decision. They had to have known full and well that people were going to put the game on Christmas lists simply because they wanted a basketball game for the PlayStation 2. A lump of coal in the stocking though? Well, it would have been an improvement on finding this game under the Christmas tree. When the reviews for NCAA Final Four 2001 were finally published in those magazines, the game was absolutely brutalized. It was like when D1 schools play that random exhibition at home against some D2 program from a school that has like 200 students. In the February 2001 edition of the official US PlayStation magazine, Todd Suniga opined, "The flaws in this bullet in the brain of college hoops are endless," before warning, "I'll state this clearly, do not buy this game or your children will hate you." The problem, of course, is that warning was too little too late. Christmas was over and many kids had already had the game foisted upon them. Meanwhile, the February 2001 edition of Electronic Gaming Monthly made those words seem kind in comparison. Dan Leahy proclaimed, "I'll just say this, the game looks and plays like it has been dragged through a cow's ass." Ouch. Safe to say, NCAA Final Four 2001 would have moved far fewer units had it not created a sense of urgency among buyers during the holiday season before they could be properly informed. It's also important to remember where we are here on the 989 Sports timeline. There is just a lot of unbridled anger from all corners being directed at the studio. They burst onto the scene as this competitor to EA Sports and gave us some really fun games, but they spread themselves entirely too thin, and by 99 and 2000 they were just putting out one dud after another. It was just extremely upsetting for many sports gamers out there, considering 989 Sports were still asking us to pay full prices for these new releases. Love for 989 had turned into anger. However, this anger would be replaced by indifference a few years later when Sega entered the fray and began challenging EA. With that in mind, was NCAA Final Four 2001 really one of the worst basketball games for PlayStation 2, or was it simply a matter of misplaced feelings towards 989 Studios in general? The answer is yes. Look, if you spent about 10 minutes with this game, you'd think it was passable. The intro is pretty solid, the menus are okay, most of the teams are there, more than 300 teams are in it. If you played a game for like 30 seconds, you'd believe it was fine. I mean, the courts are really well done. The arenas, while there are no specific arenas in this title, the courts, the stands, it all looks just fine. Nothing remarkable, but surely not one of the worst basketball games ever released for the PlayStation 2. Hell, there is even a ref on the court, something Madden cannot do in 2024. But like a string hanging off a sweater, the entire thing begins to unravel once you start tugging on it. And once you start pulling the string of NCAA Final Four 2001, you really can't stop, and all you end up with is the faint resemblance of a basketball video game. Here's the deal, I'm not going to fault it for not having a dynasty mode. It would have been a good inclusion, especially since the PS1 version of the game had it, but there's still a season mode with conference tournaments and a bubble watch. You have a straight NCAA tournament mode. It's not like this is completely bare bones. It's light on game modes, but many of those sports games released early on in the PS2 lifecycle weren't fully fleshed out. Honestly, there was enough here to keep gamers satisfied, assuming the on-court product was even remotely playable. Alas, it was not. I can't confirm if NCAA Final Four 2001 was, in fact, dragged through a cow's ass, but that statement wasn't a million miles away from the truth. Graphically, as I said, the courts and arenas look nice, even if the latter's just a few generic models. Crowds are fine for early stage PS2, and the players seem fairly sharp, at least upon first glance. Further review and the closer you get reveals a horror show. First, they all have this Gumby-like consistency. It's just odd. There's a lot of elongation. Arms do not match bodies at all. It's jarring. Faces are somehow more creepy. For reasons no one will ever understand, the game's developer opted to use real faces for a game involving players whose likenesses they couldn't use anyway. Instead, every team has like these same 12 random dudes. Compounding the matter is that these realistic faces do not go with the somewhat blurry and not very realistic bodies, nor do the lighting match. Like, these faces have very specific lighting that don't match the rest of the player's body. You have a real face on a Gumby body. The cherry on top of this creep sundae are the eyes, which will give you the heebiest of jeebies if you look at them for too long. The kicker in all of this is that the game is constantly serving up random and totally unnecessary cutaways of players very close up, oftentimes featuring their faces. You are constantly reminded of just how truly terrible these player models are. Also, at one point during my time with the title, a player looked directly into the camera and did this eyebrow wiggle after I missed a free throw. I mean, holy freaking hell. What is this? Why was it included in the game? Seriously, did Killer Games just recycle the zombie character models from Resident Evil Code Veronica but clean them up to pre-zombie form? Maybe, just maybe, the bizarre player models were chosen on purpose as a way to distract from just how truly awful NCAA Final Four 2001 gameplay happens to be. No one will realize how shit our game is if they've been creeped out to Timbuktu. At least that's what maybe 989 thought. It didn't quite work out that way. There is so much to dislike about gameplay, but let's start with the biggest bugaboo of them all. All of the camera angles in NCAA Final Four 2001 suck. They are borderline unusable. Either you're too close, you're not high enough, you're too far away, or you're stuck in some wonky view that no one would ever want to use when playing a basketball game. Adding insult to injury is that the camera stops following the ball or jumps ahead of the ball at times during the game. Simply put, there is just no enjoyable, there's no tolerable viewing experience when you're playing NCAA Final Four 2001. You just have to pick the one that's least bad for you. Yet somehow this could be the least of your concerns. In fact, you'd rather have a camera pointing just about anywhere else than on the on-court action. NCAA Final Four 2001 plays with all of the charm of Michael Scott at a Dave & Buster's.
Nice to meet me. How do you like your eggs in the morning?
Let us start with what is unequivocally the most game-breaking aspect of the title: passing. There's no weight to passing. There's no urgency to passing. The ball just sort of lazily travels from point A to point B, independent of everything else. And when a teammate catches the ball, they most likely stop dead in their tracks. This means at some stage during the first half of every game you will play, you just come to the realization your best move is to spam turbo up the court with your best player, and if that doesn't work, maybe you passed once and you do a pump fake. The rim physics are fine, but the floaty nature of the basketball itself makes rebounding kind of a disaster as players jump at normal speed and regularly miss the ball entirely. They'll jump up and they'll be on the ground before anyone has a rebound. It's just really peculiar. Jumping is also peculiar thanks to a bunch of half-baked animations. There are times when players will linger in midair or jump way higher than they have any right to, or sometimes they won't even jump high enough on jump shots. Player movement is clunky, and too often you just catch a player gliding around the court as if they were ice skating. There are also a few times when certain actions, such as pressing the button to steal a ball, will see your player just bullet train towards the ball itself. So you could be on one side of the court and their animation is just going to rush them over to wherever the ball is. All of this is complemented by some of the most useless AI ever programmed for the PlayStation 2. Your teammates they don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're doing, especially on offense. There's just so much nothing happening. And when someone finally does move, it is almost always to a spot on the court you don't want them to be. I cannot count the number of times the AI just had a teammate run into me after I received an inbounds pass. Your computer opponent is not much better, and the difficulty settings of NCAA Final Four 2001 do not actually make the game more challenging, just cheesier. If you're playing on freshman, the easiest level, the CPU is just really slow and misses a lot of shots. As you change the difficulty settings, the computer doesn't play smarter, it is just faster, and it starts making more shots. If all of this wasn't enough to turn you off NCAA Final Four 2001, well, officiating is going to make sure it sends you over the edge. This game has no idea what is and isn't a foul. There are times when you can just hack the bejesus out of a ball handler and not get called for anything. Yet anytime a shot is contested with a block, it's basically a coin flip as to whether or not a shooting foul will be assessed. And I cannot stress this enough. There is really no rhyme or reason to shooting fouls being called. The game is not fun to begin with. Interrupting it with constant free throw shooting is really rubbing salt into the wound. There is no single element of NCAA Final Four 2001 gameplay that is redeeming. There's nothing even approaching being redeeming. After a lone 5-minute half, you are beyond frustrated. Basically, it's just all about finding that one or two spammy ways to score with whatever team you're playing as, and just do that over and over again, and then hope the computer misses a few shots. Sure, you can change defenses, 2-3 zone, full court press, they're all there. You can try to do different things, but most games see you revert back to that formula. And really, there is no fun to be had in trying different things, especially on offense, because passing doesn't work, player movement is wonky, and the AI may or may not know the rules of basketball. The entire package is wrapped in a nice, neat little bow thanks to Lifeless commentary from Quinn Buckner, who reads his lines with the joy of a hostage.
Shot. No dice.
Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if he did something other than just throw out some random 3-second quip kind of describing the action.
Detroit picks it up. That'll be a foul by 12.
He actually does have some really deep cut commentary about certain schools, such as this doozy about Pacific.
Slashes to the hoop. Located in beautiful Stockton, California, University of Pacific was founded in 1851, but they started playing NCAA basketball in 1911.
I was shocked when that piece of commentary came up because I hadn't heard Buckner speak for more than 5 seconds consecutively up until that point, and I've been playing the game for quite a fair few hours. In fairness, the commentary does pair well with the bland, muted arena atmospheres that would be more fitting for like some deli randomly playing band music in the background. All of these negatives notwithstanding, you can't help but think being the first basketball game released for the PS2 was actually a huge mistake on 989 Sports' part. NCAA Final Four 2001 is terrible, no doubt about it. However, it wasn't that much worse than some of the NBA titles to hit store shelves just a couple of months down the road. Having the sole spotlight, though, meant everyone was exposed to just how awful this college basketball game truly was. There was nowhere for NCAA Final Four 2001 to hide, or at least go, yeah, it sucks, but so do these other basketball games. Here's the catch, though. Ultimately, as disappointing as NCAA Final Four 2001 was, its crappiness would be surpassed when EA Sports dropped March Madness 2002 nearly 12 months later. That was a game that somehow had less features and teams than what 989 Sports managed to put into this title. That, though, is a story for another time. The Final Four series would make improvements in the following years, but 2001 turned so many people off the franchise, it never really recovered. Why 989 Sports was unable to build upon the solid if unspectacular foundation of the 2000 version for PS1 is a mystery. In fact, the 2001 PS1 edition of this game was also roundly criticized for taking a step back. All things considered, NCAA Final Four 2001, it's not the worst basketball game ever released for the PS2. Hell, 989 Sports had the audacity to reskin this title with NBA teams and release it 2 months later as NBA Shootout 2001, which I'd argue is a bigger injustice. There were also a few hardware titles that are pound for pound worse than this available on the PlayStation 2. The moral of the story is don't knowingly release a game a few days before Christmas when you know the product is bad but don't want people to catch on. Make no mistake, there were a lot of people who wanted NCAA Final Four 2001 for Christmas, found it under the tree, started playing it on Christmas Day, and were thoroughly disappointed after about 20 minutes or so. It's a bad game, no doubt, but that decision to release it right before Christmas is why NCAA Final Four 2001 will forever live on in infamy. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to know more about 989 Sports' final PS2 football game, check out the video in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, or for more video game content, the playlist in the lower right-hand corner of your screen is the place to go. Until next time, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.